a village forgotten by time, a man gave everything he had to raise his only son. He sold his last goat, stayed hungry so the boy could eat, and watched from a leaking hut while his son became a man of wealth in the city. But that son, Dike, never returned, not when his father was sick, not when the roof caved in, not even when hunger came knocking. He returned only when the old man was gone, and buried him in a golden coffin, too beautiful for the man who never saw it. This is the tale of Dike, the golden son. In the days when the elders still sat beneath the great Iroko tree, under the moonlight, and told stories with shadows, there lived a man called Mazi Okoro, a man whose bones were held together by hardship and hope. He was not rich. He did not own any land except for the narrow strip where his yam molds were located. His clothes smelled of sweat and firewood, and his back bent from years of carrying yams, firewood, and faith. But in his eyes lived the light of purpose, and that purpose has a name, Dike. Dike was his only son, born during a night of thunder and fireflies. The boy came into the world with eyes sharp as razors, and a cry that made the midwife say, "This one will go far." When Dike's mother died, the hut sank into silence. Grief clung to the walls like smoke, and for many moons the cooking pot sat empty. But Mazi Okoro rose from mourning, tied his wrapper tighter, and became both the mother and father. Every day, before the first cock crowed, Mazi Okoro was already up, fetching water, boiling yam, preparing Dike's clothes with hands still shaking from sleep. He learned how to part his son's hair neatly for school inspections, not with plaits, but with a small wooden comb and a black hair cream from the village shop. He learned how to warm food without burning it, how to wipe away tears without letting his own fall. When it was time to pay school fees, Mazi Okoro sold his only goat. When the boy needed books, he walked to the next village to borrow money from a king's man. When Dike failed his JAMB exam, he didn't raise his voice. He simply took off the old wristwatch his father had given him, his only inheritance, and sold it to pay for extra lessons. People asked him, "Okoro, is it not too much for one child?" He would smile and say, "This boy will carry my name beyond the hills. I do not give him riches, I give him a road." And so, Dike walked that road. The boy grew tall, clever, and full of fire. He passed his exams like someone sent by the ancestors themselves. He went off to the university, leaving the village behind like a snake shedding its skin. And when he rose fast. In the city, Dike became a man of wealth. He lived in a house where the walls gleamed like glass and the floor never knew the touch of bare feet. His clothes came from Europe. His shoes clicked like gunshots on marble. His car, black as midnight, moved without noise. They called him Dike, the golden son. His name was carried on the winds, whispered in barber shops, and shouted in beer parlors. Even the village elders spoke of him with pride. But they did not know the other truth. Back in Umuofia, Mazi Okoro still lived in the same hut, now old, leaning like a tired man. The roof leaked when rain falls. The walls cracked. The floor, once swept daily, now gathered dust and loneliness. Each evening, the old man sat outside with a piece of kola nut and a distant look in his eyes. He would greet anyone passing by and ask, "Did Dike send a word?" But the answer was always the same. There were no visits, no letters, no voice through the phone, only silence, stretching like the harmattan wind. He never begged, never cursed, but every market day, he prepared a small portion of yam, just in case his son arrived. The food always went cold. One morning, the healer came rushing from the west end of the village. "Mazi Okoro is very sick," he said. "His breath is shallow, like a dying fire." Word was sent to Dike. He was in the city, signing contracts, shaking hands, laughing into wine glasses. When he heard, he frowned and said, "I will go when I can. For now, send him some money for medicine." And so Dike sent money home without even a phone call to know how his old man was doing, and he did not visit. That same night, Mazi Okoro lay still in his bed. His eyes searched the floor and the door one last time. And then he breathed his final breath, with his son's name still caught between his teeth. When the news reached the city, Dike arrived with a convoy that stretched from one palm tree to the next. The whole village came out to watch. His agbada shimmered like river water under moonlight. His shoes looked like they had never touched the dust. He cried very loudly. Tears fell. Voice cracked. He tore his clothes and beat his chest. And then he began to spend. Dike hired a band from Enugu, brought caterers from Port Harcourt, slaughtered cows, goats, and even a ram with twisted horns. The casket was gold-plated, heavy like gilt, imported, glossy, and pointless. He deposited his father's body in the mortuary for 4 months, and within this time, he built a new house on the very land where his father's old hut once stood, a house the old man would never sleep in. The day of the burial. The sun rose slowly that morning, as if even the heavens hesitated to witness what was about to unfold. Mazi Okoro's body was laid inside a gold-plated casket, shining so brightly that some villagers shaded their eyes as it passed. It was the kind of casket spoken of in Lagos high society, the kind no farmer, no matter how noble, could ever dream of while alive. The casket was placed in the back of a brand new Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, the latest model, black, gleaming and untouched by dust. The same kind of car Mazi Okoro used to admire from the roadside when the wealthy passed through Umuofia. A car he never sat in, never leaned on, never even touched while alive. But now in death, it carried him like a fallen king, returning home from war. And behind that Benz came an entourage of cars, SUVs, sedans, jeeps, and luxury buses, stretching so long the village road like a procession for a king's coronation. The drummers beat their talking drums with urgency. The flutist played melodies that pierced the wind. The dancers moved as if possessed by ancestral spirits. People lined the path, watching in awe and murmuring, "Ah, Okoro, you must have lived a good life. Look at this burial." But few remembered how the same man once walked barefoot to the farm with a sack of cassava on his back, how he fetched firewood in his 70s because no one came to help, how he ate alone most nights, his meals cold and tasteless. Now musicians sang his praises. Praise singers called his name with voices that cracked the air. And then Dike stood before the crowd. He wore white lace, freshly imported with coral beads, hanging around his neck like a chief. In his hands was a fine scroll tied with a red ribbon, paper thicker than the letters his father once wrote to him that went unanswered. Dike stood before the people and read from a fine scroll. His voice trembled as he read. "My father was a great man. He taught me strength. He taught me sacrifice. He taught me honor. He was a great man, a noble man, a man of wisdom and strength." But just then a gush of wind blew across the compound. Some say it was coincidence. Others said it was Mazi Okoro himself, sighing from beneath the earth. But before he could finish, an old voice cut through the air. It was Mama Agatha, the midwife who helped deliver Dike years ago. She leaned on her cane, her voice thin but sharp. "Dike," she said, "your tears are loud, but your silence when he was alive was louder. You say he was great, yet you left him in a hut that barely stood. You built him a palace in death, but denied him a greeting in life. Now you dress your shame in gold, but your father never saw it." The crowd grew quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. Dike lowered his eyes. The scroll slipped from his hand. The gold shimmered in the sun, but no one looked at it. People began to murmur because they all knew this was not a burial of honor. It was a burial of guilt, a show of what should have been done while the old man could still smile, still speak and bless. That night, long after the drummers slept and the guests eating till they are filled, Dike returned to his father's grave. He knelt beside the fresh mound of earth. The soil was still soft. His hands dug into it, not to unearth the body, but to hold something real. And there in the dark he whispered, "I gave you too much too late. I poured blessings after your eyes had closed. I buried you twice, once with neglect, and now with riches you cannot see." The wind carried his voice into the trees. Whether forgiveness came, no one knows. There are those who plant their love only at the grave. They bring musicians to play for the dead but cannot spare time for the living. They carry their fathers in golden caskets but could not carry their bags while they were alive. And when the mourners go and the ground is sealed, all that remains is silence and regret. The moral of the story: do not honor the dead more than the living, for 1,000 praises shouted at a grave are worth less than one kind word said to the living. And so in the land where drums speak and the trees remember, they still whisper the tale of the man who gave nothing in life but brought too much to a grave. May we not wait for silence before we speak love. May our flowers be given to the living and not the dead.